You're outdated. We're done here, he hissed. I nodded. Understood. That was the moment the retirement trust activated its voting rights. By Monday morning, the board convened an emergency meeting. The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Who just fired the person who owned 76% of the shares? I've learned that betrayal always announces itself with confidence. My father had plenty of that. I was in the hospital corridor when my mother collapsed. The smell of antiseptic, the rattle of a gurney. Her fingers went slack in mine as the nurse called for help. A phone buzzed in my pocket. My aunt's name flashed, again and again. That's when the truth finally aligned. The late-night family dinners, the matching vacations, the way my father flinched when her name came up, then smiled too hard. I stood there watching the doors swing shut on my mother, and something inside me calcified. Pain first, then clarity. We had been a careful family. Sunday lunches, handwritten notes. My father taught me chess at 8, mergers at 16. He said legacy wasn't money, it was control. He said loyalty was everything. My aunt lived close. Too close. She laughed at his jokes before the punchline. She wore my mother's perfume like a challenge. I ignored it because love trains you to ignore alarms. When my mother woke days later, her voice was thin. She asked if he'd been there. I said yes. I lied cleanly. I wasn't ready to burn the house while she was still inside. The proof arrived quietly. A bank statement misfiled. A lease in both their names, a sonogram photo tucked into a folder labeled tax. I didn't confront them. Confrontation is for amateurs. I watched. I listened. I documented. I learned the rhythm of their deceit. Tuesdays were for lawyers, Fridays for silence payments, Sundays for God. Pain sharpened into purpose. I stopped crying. I started planning. My father underestimated me because he raised me to be useful, not threatening. He taught me the machinery and assumed I'd never pull the lever. I set up a trust, retirement. Estate, voting, layered and boring, the kind auditors don't question. I bought quietly. Through shells. Through time. I let him think he still held the crown while I counted the votes. I collected evidence the way some people collect stamps, emails, prenups breached, non-disclosures violated, photos with timestamps and reflections that caught what mirrors missed. I made myself indispensable. I solved problems before they knew they had them. I became the calm voice in rooms where tempers flared. I waited. Years later, my mother was gone. The house felt hollow but clean. My father called me into his office like a king summoning a clerk. They're struggling, he said, not looking up. The kids need stability. Your family. You'll raise them. Not ask, declare. I thought of my mother's fingers slipping from mine. I thought of the nights I held her hand while machines breathed for her. I said nothing. Silence is a language he never learned. You owe me, he added. After everything. That was when I decided the timing was perfect. The execution was surgical. First, the audit. Anonymous tip. Documented irregularities. The kind that force banks to pause and boards to sweat. Second, the votes. The trust moved like a tide. Quiet, inevitable. Third, the exposure. Not tabloids, courts. Not screams, filings. I let the facts do the violence. The boardroom on Monday was cold. Suits. Coffee untouched. My father's confidence cracked when the numbers hit the screen. Who authorized this? He snapped. I cleared my throat. I did. He laughed. He always laughed when he was wrong. Then the chair asked the question. The one that ends dynasties. Who just fired the person who owns 76% of the shares? Silence answered. Power shifted. The confrontation wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was procedural. My aunt cried. She always performed well. The children stared at the table, confused, collateral. My father reached for me like muscle memory. You can't do this, he said. I'm your father. I met his eyes. You taught me how. I didn't take the kids. I set up a fund, education, therapy, distance. I refused the lie that mercy requires proximity. They lost the house, the status, the protection of plausible deniability. He lost his seat. His name slid off buildings like dust. He called me once after, voice stripped of armor. What do you want? I answered honestly. For you to understand. He never will. That's fine. Now, when I think back to that corridor, the antiseptic, the gurney, I don't feel the old ache. I feel resolve. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't posture. It moves in meetings and signatures and quiet nods. I didn't destroy them. I removed the scaffolding that held their lies upright. Legacy, my father said, wasn't money. It was control. He was right. And now it's mine.